I was 3 weeks away from turning 18 the morning my stepmother changed the locks. She didn't shout. She didn't slam the door. She stood just inside the front hall of my father's house on the maple floor. He had sanded himself the summer I turned 12, and she handed the new brass keys to the locksmith through a 2-inch crack in the door. Like it was a grocery list. Like I wasn't standing on the porch with a duffel bag on my shoulder and my 9-year-old brother's small hand tucked inside my coat pocket. The locksmith wouldn't look at me. He was a young man with tired eyes and paint under his fingernails, and I could tell he wished he was anywhere else in the state of New Hampshire that October morning. He drilled out the old cylinder. He fitted the new one. He tested the deadbolt 3 times. And through the whole thing, my stepmother Vivian stood inside the house, watching us, the way a woman watches strangers pass on a highway. She was 46 years old, and she wore my mother's pearl earrings. That was the part that broke me a little. My father, Nathaniel Hartwell, had been dead 2 years and 1 week. Colon cancer. He was 43 when they told him. He was 45 when it took him. He had been a carpenter before he was sick. And a good one, the kind whose customers wrote thank you notes and kept coming back for the second and third jobs. He had married Vivian when I was 11, 3 years after my mother died. He loved her, I think. He loved her the way a lonely widower loves a woman who is willing to make casseroles for a grieving man and his quiet little girl. But he never told Vivian he loved me more. He didn't have to. Vivian knew. And after he died, when the lawyer read the will and there was no clause protecting his children, Vivian smiled a very small, very patient smile. And I understood right there in that lawyer's office that I had exactly 2 years to find a way out of that house. I didn't find one fast enough. The morning she changed the locks, I had come home from a double shift at the 24-hour laundromat off Route 12. I worked nights so Rowan could sleep in the guest room upstairs while I was gone. I worked mornings at the diner on Elm Street. Between them, I made about $90 a day cash, most of which I kept folded inside a sock in the bottom of my duffel bag. I had been saving. I had a plan. The plan was to get to my 18th birthday and then file for guardianship of Rowan through the county and then figure out the rest. The plan did not include Vivian changing the locks 3 weeks early. She had left our 2 suitcases on the porch, my duffel, Rowan's little rolling case with the blue race car on the side. She had packed for us. She had even folded Rowan's pajamas. The locksmith finished. He nodded at Vivian and walked past me down the steps without a word. Vivian closed the door. I heard the deadbolt click. Rowan looked up at me. "Where do we go?" he asked. I couldn't feel my hands. "Somewhere warm," I said. "We're going somewhere warm." We got in the car. The car was a 1997 Honda Civic, silver, 214,000 miles, and a check engine light that had been on since Rowan was in kindergarten. It had been my father's first car. He had kept it long past the point when he could afford something better, because he used to say a man's first car was like a marriage. You didn't throw it away just because it embarrassed you sometimes. It had a cassette player. Rowan and I only listened to 2 tapes over and over. One was a mix of James Taylor songs my father made me when I was little. The other was Rowan's favorite, a Disney movie soundtrack that had been in the tape deck the day Vivian handed us the keys and told us the car was ours. Take it. Get out. We drove. We drove to the parking lot of the 24-hour Walmart on Route 9. It was the safest lot in the county because it was well lit. And there was always a security guard on the graveyard shift who knew my face from the times I'd come in at 2 in the morning for cough syrup or new socks for Rowan or an oil filter. I did not know how to install. His name was Dwayne. He was a black man in his late 50s with a kind face and a bad knee. And the first night we slept in that parking lot, he tapped on my window at 3 in the morning and asked if I needed anything. I told him no. He nodded slowly. He tapped once on the glass gently like a blessing. And then he walked away and did not come back. But every night after that, I noticed he parked his own truck in the space beside ours, not close enough to look like he was watching. Just close enough that anyone else looking at our silver Civic would see the truck and think twice. I never thanked him. I did not know how. Rowan slept in the passenger seat with his knees tucked up and his cheek on my father's old canvas jacket. I slept sitting up. Driver's seat reclined with the keys in the ignition in case we had to leave fast. Some nights I did not sleep at all. I would sit and watch the frost creep up the windshield and think about my father and about my mother before him, and about the way both of them had left the world without asking my permission. The morning shift at the diner started at 5. I would carry Rowan into the diner still wrapped in the jacket, lay him down in the corner booth by the pie case, and let the waitresses feed him toast and jam while I worked the counter. Rita ran the diner. She was 73, and she had been widowed for 30 years, and she looked the other way about a lot of things. "Honey, she said to me one morning in that low voice she saved for serious matters. You can't do this forever. I knew. I have a plan, I told her. I know you do, sweetheart, she said. I'm just saying, plans have a way. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of the parking lot. 2 weeks of Rowan waking up with his hair frozen to the window. 2 weeks of me telling him this was an adventure. We were pioneers. We were like the children in the storybooks. We were going to be fine. Then the phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the laundromat folding a pile of sheets from the drop-off pile when my cell phone buzzed in my apron. The number was a Vermont area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered because I thought it might be one of the collection agencies, and I had learned it was better to talk to them than to run. Is this Wren Hartwell? A woman's voice said. Yes. My name is Eleanor Voss. I'm an attorney in Willowmere Hollow, Vermont. I'm calling because your grandmother, Ruth Ashcombe, passed away 3 weeks ago, and she left everything she owned to you. I sat down on the tile floor of the laundromat, still holding the sheet, and I said, I don't have a grandmother. There was a very long pause on the other end. Yes, honey, Eleanor Voss said. You do. She told me a lot of things that afternoon. She told me my father Nathaniel had been Ruth Ashcombe's only son. She told me Ruth had lived on 11 acres of orchard land in northern Vermont, near the Canadian border in a town of about 3,000 people called Willowmere Hollow. She told me Ruth had left a will, and in the will the entire property and a small trust that had been set aside in cash would pass to me on my 18th birthday, 3 weeks away. Why me? I said. Why not my father? Why didn't I know she existed? Eleanor Voss was quiet for a moment. That, honey, she said, is a longer conversation. And I think it's one your grandmother wanted to have with you herself. She left a letter. I closed my eyes. The 11 acres, the trust, the letter, 3 weeks. My hands were still shaking, and Rowan was drawing dinosaurs on the back of a receipt at the booth by the window of the laundromat, and the sun was going down over Route 12, and I knew right then that we were leaving New Hampshire. We left the next morning. The drive to Vermont was 6 hours. We stopped once for gas once, so Rowan could pet a very old golden retriever tied up outside a rest stop convenience store. He asked me 3 times if we were going to a real house. I told him yes. I told him I hoped so. The last hour of the drive was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. The interstate narrowed and then narrowed again, and became a 2-lane road that climbed up into the mountains, through stands of maples that had gone red and gold and orange, all at once so thick on both sides of the road that it felt like driving through a burning tunnel. Rowan pressed his face against the window and stopped talking. Even the Civic seemed to quiet down. We came over the last ridge just before sunset, and there was the town. Willowmere Hollow sat in a small green valley between 2 long, low mountains. It had a white steepled church and a general store, with a wide porch and a grange hall with a sagging roof and a graveyard with an iron fence and 1 traffic light. That was the whole town. Beyond it, farmland unrolled in every direction. Stone walls, cows, a silo, a red barn with the paint gone silver from the weather. Eleanor Voss met us in the parking lot of her office, which was above the pharmacy on Main Street. She was a small woman, 60-something, in a wool coat and no-nonsense glasses, and when she saw Rowan, her whole face softened. You must be tired, she said. We're okay, I said. You must be tired, she said again. It's an hour to the property. I'll drive behind you. There's food in the house. Ruth arranged it. She said that last part like she was still surprised by it. We followed her taillights out of town on a road that climbed and dipped and climbed again, and after about 40 minutes, she turned off onto a gravel drive lined with old sugar maples, and the drive went on for what felt like half a mile before it opened up into a wide, gentle bowl of land ringed by more of those low mountains, and there in the middle of it was the farmhouse. I stopped the car. It was a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, 2 stories, a stone chimney, a cedar shake roof gone silver with age. There was 1 lamp on inside, warm and yellow, glowing through the kitchen window. There was a barn behind it, weathered gray, and beyond the barn the land sloped down into an apple orchard, and the apple orchard was full of trees so old and so heavy with fruit that some of them were leaning like tired old men. And at the edge of the orchard, half hidden under a row of maples, there was a small red shed. Rowan whispered, "Are we really allowed to be here?" I couldn't answer him. Eleanor Voss walked up to my window and tapped gently. She handed me a house key on a wooden fob shaped like an apple, and then she handed me an envelope. My name was written on the front in a long, delicate hand I did not recognize. She wrote it a year before she died, Eleanor said. She told me not to give it to you until you were standing on the property. She was very particular about that. I took it. I'll come back tomorrow morning, Eleanor said. There's food in the fridge. Beds are made. Take your time. The land isn't going anywhere. She drove away. Rowan and I sat in the Civic for a long time. The engine ticked as it cooled. A bat swooped past the porch light. Somewhere far off, a barred owl called. 2 long notes, then 5 short ones, then silence. Rowan whispered, Wren, can we go in? We got out of the car. The porch boards were solid under our feet. The key turned in the front door on the first try, and when I pushed the door open, the smell that came out of that house was the smell of cedar chests and old wool and apples cooked with cinnamon, and a wood stove that had been recently lit, and something else, something I couldn't name at first, something warm and familiar that made my chest hurt. It smelled like my father. Rowan felt it too. I saw him stop in the doorway and put his hand flat against the frame the way our father used to. Wren, he said, it smells like him in here. There was a stew on the stove, a loaf of bread on the counter, a note in the same handwriting as the envelope taped to the refrigerator. There are clean sheets in the hall closet. The blue room is for the boy. The room at the end of the hall was your father's. Eat something before you read the letter. Ruth. I made Rowan a bowl of stew. I watched him eat it at the big pine table in the kitchen, and I watched his shoulders come down from around his ears for the first time in 2 weeks. And when he was done, I carried him upstairs to the blue room, and I tucked him in, and I sat on the edge of the bed until his breathing went slow and deep. Then I went down to the kitchen. I sat at the big pine table. I put the envelope in front of me. I put my palms flat on either side of it, and I opened it. My Wren, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I have finally run out of the time I was hoping I would have with you. I'm so sorry. I tried for many years to find a way to you, and every road was closed to me for reasons I will explain in a place other than this letter. For now, please know only this. I have loved you every day of your life. I have loved your brother too, though I never met him. I have loved your father from the first minute I held him. And I loved my brother, who you have never heard of, more than I have ever loved anyone besides your grandfather Henry. The land is yours, the house is yours, and the small trust will be yours in 3 weeks on your 18th birthday, and no one on this earth can take it from you. But before you sell any of it, before you make any decision at all about what to do with the pieces of a life I could not give you in person, I need you to do one thing for me. Before you sell this land, open the old shed. Do not hurry. Do not do it tonight. Sleep first. Feed the child. Feed yourself. And in the morning, when the light is good, walk down through the orchard and open the door of the little red shed at the edge of the trees. I have been waiting a very long time for someone in this family to be brave enough to open that door. I love you. Grandma Ruth. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. And then I laid my head down on the kitchen table on my folded arms and I cried. For the first time since my father died. I cried the ugly kind of crying, the shaking kind, the kind that makes your ribs hurt. I cried for the grandmother I did not know I had. I cried for my father, who must have known about her, and who must have had reasons for not telling me. I cried for Rowan sleeping upstairs in a blue room made ready for him by a woman who had never met him. I cried because, for the first time in 2 years, I was inside a house that felt like a house, and I did not know what to do with that. And through all of it, I could feel the shed out there in the dark, waiting. Now, before we open that shed together, I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about a moment in your own life when a door closed behind you and you were not ready. Maybe it was a house, maybe it was a marriage, maybe it was a job or a child leaving home or a diagnosis. Maybe it was just a season of your life you did not agree to end. And then I want you to think about what you would have done if a stranger had handed you a key and a letter and told you there was one more door left to open. Would you have opened it, or would you have driven away? If you have been listening this far, tap the like button and leave me your answer down in the comments. I want to hear you. I want to know what you would have chosen. And then stay with me, because in the morning, Wren is going to walk down to that shed, and what she finds inside is going to change everything. The morning came slow and gray and clean the way mornings only come in the mountains. I woke up on the couch in the front parlor with my father's canvas jacket over me because I had not been able to make myself sleep in his old bedroom. Rowan came down the stairs still in his pajamas, dragging the wool blanket from his bed behind him like a small king's cape. Are we going to the shed, he asked. After breakfast, I said. We ate toast made from Ruth's bread. We drank coffee from a percolator I had to teach myself how to use. We put on our coats. And then Rowan slipped his hand into mine, and we walked out the back door of the farmhouse, across the wet grass past the barn down through the orchard. The orchard smelled like sugar and rain. Fallen apples were everywhere. Some were still perfect. Some had turned brown and given themselves back to the ground. A crow watched us from the top branch of the tallest tree. The shed sat at the end of a narrow footpath. It was smaller than it had looked from the porch. The red paint had gone the color of old brick. One of the shutters hung crooked. There was a black iron latch on the door, and above the latch, hanging from a leather thong, was a heavy iron padlock. I braced myself. I had been imagining rusted padlocks for 12 hours, but when I put my hand on the padlock, it swung free in my palm. The lock was not locked. It was hanging on the loop of the latch, closed but not clasped the way you might rest a hat on a hook. I stared at it. I looked at Rowan. Rowan looked at me. I lifted the padlock off the latch and set it gently on the ground. I lifted the latch. I pulled the door open. The door groaned like an old man waking up. In a small square of morning sunlight spilled into the little red shed, and I saw what my grandmother had left for me. And nothing in my life afterward was ever the same again. The inside of the shed was not what I had expected. I had expected junk. Broken rakes, empty paint cans, mouse droppings, spiderwebs the size of dinner plates. I had expected the smell of rot. I had braced myself for the smell of rot. What I got instead was the smell of cedar. Cedar and dried lavender and old paper and a very faint whisper of pipe tobacco. The floor was clean. Not new, but clean, swept, cared for. There was a wooden rocking chair by the small window and a folded quilt draped over its back. There was a workbench along the far wall, and on the workbench there was a brass oil lamp, a pair of steel-rimmed reading glasses, a pocket watch on a leather cord, and a single sealed envelope. There were shelves. On the shelves, arranged the way a librarian arranges a small, precious collection, were stacks of letters tied with string, 3 leather-bound journals, and a wooden box carved with a pattern of apple leaves. There was a photograph in a plain black frame hanging on the wall above the workbench. And in the corner of the shed, half covered by a length of white linen, there was a cedar chest with brass corners darkened by age, and on top of the chest was a small iron key. Rowan whispered, "It looks like a room." He was right. It did not look like storage. It looked like a room where someone had lived and had recently stepped out for a moment and would be back at any second to sit down in the rocker and pick up whatever book they had left, face down on the arm. I picked up the envelope from the workbench. Across the front, in my grandmother's long, delicate hand, were 3 words, "For my family." I opened it. "If you are standing here, reading this," the note said, "then you honored my only request. Thank you. What you will find in this room is not valuable because of what it is worth. It is valuable because it tells the truth. Please do not hurt. Some stories need to be discovered 1 page at a time. Start with the chest. Start with the photograph inside it. And when you are ready, you will find the last letter I ever wrote at the bottom of everything. But you must earn it. R." I folded the note. I put it in my coat pocket. My hand was shaking a little. The photograph on the wall was black and white. It showed 3 people standing together under an apple tree in what looked like the height of summer. A young woman with dark hair pulled back. A young man in a work shirt with his sleeves rolled up. And between them, one arm draped over each of their shoulders. A third person laughing, his head thrown back, caught by the camera in the middle of a laugh so free it made my chest ache to look at it. I knew the young woman. She had my father's eyes. She was my grandmother Ruth. I could guess the young man. Broad shoulders, kind mouth. That must be Henry, my grandfather. But the third person, the one laughing, I had never seen him before in my life. I lifted the photograph off the wall and turned it over. On the back, in the same delicate hand, was one line. "Some families are born, others are built by courage." I stared at that line for a very long time. Then Rowan tugged on my sleeve. "Wren," he said, "the key is warm." He was holding the small iron key from the top of the cedar chest. He was right. When he pressed it into my palm, it did feel warm, as if it had been sitting in the sun, though the sun had not touched this corner of the shed. I did not try to explain it. I did not want to. I knelt down in front of the cedar chest. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The lid opened with a small, soft click. Inside was a whole life. Bundles of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. Journals bound in cracked brown leather, pressed apple blossoms between sheets of tissue paper. A folded American flag in a triangular case. A small velvet jewelry box. A pair of soldiers' dog tags on a beaded chain. And on the very top, resting on everything else, was another framed photograph. This one was in color. Faded Kodachrome color. Late afternoon light. 3 figures again, but older this time. My grandmother, her hair gone silver. My grandfather Henry in a wool jacket, one hand resting on the shoulder of the third person. And the third person, the man from the black and white photo, now maybe 60 years old, sitting on the porch steps of this very farmhouse with a small boy of about 10 leaning against his knees. The small boy was my father. I knew the shape of his face at 10 years old because I had a picture of him on the wall of my bedroom back in New Hampshire at exactly that age. Same cowlick, same crooked smile. My father had known this man. My father had leaned against his knees, comfortable, familiar, safe. And no one had ever in 17 years of my life said his name. I sat back on my heels in the middle of the cedar-scented shed, holding a photograph of my dead father as a little boy leaning on a stranger. And I understood two things at once. The first was that my grandmother had not left me a farm. The second was that whatever she had left me instead, it was going to be much harder to carry. I called Eleanor Voss on my cell phone from the porch of the farmhouse a little before noon. I was going to call the realtor today, I said. I'm not going to. There was a small, quiet sound on the other end of the line that might have been Eleanor Voss smiling. All right, honey, she said. Take your time. How much time do I have? I asked. Before I have to decide anything about the land, about Rowan, about all of it. Legally, you have until your birthday for the trust to activate, she said. But nothing has to be decided by then. Nothing at all. Your grandmother arranged things so that you would have time. She was very clear about that. Why? I said. Why was she so clear about that? Eleanor Voss took a breath. Because she used to say, Eleanor said carefully, that anything worth understanding in this family takes a while. I hung up. I walked back into the shed. Rowan was sitting on the floor by the cedar chest, cross-legged, holding one of the leather-bound journals in his lap, like it was a small animal he did not want to startle. Wren, he said, I think we should read them in order. I was 9 years old, and he was right. The 3 journals were labeled on the inside covers in 3 different hands. The first was in a firm, upright script that turned out to be my grandmother Ruth's. The second was in a rougher, slanted hand that turned out to be my grandfather Henry's. The third had no name on the inside cover at all. Only a single pressed apple blossom taped to the first page and a line of writing beneath it. If you are reading this, then Ruth has finally decided the world is ready to know who I really was. I picked up the third journal. I sat down in the rocking chair by the window. Rowan curled up on the floor beside me with his cheek on my boot. And I opened the first page and I began to read. The first entry was dated March of 1954. My name is Elias Whitcomb, the entry began. I am 24 years old. 3 weeks ago, the United States Army released me from a hospital in California. 2 weeks ago, my mother told me she did not know me anymore. 1 week ago, my father put my duffel bag on the porch and closed the front door and locked it while I was still standing on the steps. Today, my sister Ruth found me on a bench outside the bus station in Rutland, Vermont, and she took me home. I looked up from the page. Elias Whitcomb. Ruth had a brother. I had a great uncle, I read on. Elias had gone to Korea in 1951 when he was 21 years old. He had come back 3 years later, thin and quiet, with something wrong inside him that no doctor in 1954 knew how to name. He could not stand loud noises. He could not sleep. He could not sit with his back to a door. When a truck backfired in the street, he went down flat on the sidewalk and did not get up for a full minute. His mother said he was not the boy she had raised. His father said he was a coward for coming back the way he had. They did not use the word broken. They did not have to. Ruth was 5 years younger than Elias. She had just married Henry Ashcombe. They had just bought a farm in northern Vermont with money Henry had inherited from an uncle. And when Ruth heard from a cousin that Elias had been sent home from the Veterans Hospital and had nowhere to go, she got on a Greyhound bus and she rode it for 2 days. And she found her brother on that bench outside the bus station, and she brought him home with her. She brought him home to this farm, to this shed. The shed had been Elias's room for the last 36 years of his life. He had lived here and worked in the orchard beside Henry and set an extra plate at Ruth's kitchen table every single night, from 1954 until he died quietly of a stroke in 1990 at the age of 60. And no one in the town of Willowmere Hollow had ever in all those years treated Elias as a member of the family. They had been polite. They had nodded at him in the general store. They had let him sit in the back pew at the Methodist church, but they had never invited him to a wedding or a funeral or a Sunday supper. When the newspaper ran the obituary for Henry Ashcombe in 1978, it listed Ruth as the surviving spouse, and it listed my father, Nathaniel, as the surviving son. It did not mention Elias, who had lived with them for 24 years by that point, and who had helped Henry build the second wing of the farmhouse with his own 2 hands. I lowered the journal. Rowan looked up at me. Wren, he said quietly, why is your face like that? I did not know how to explain to a 9-year-old that we had just discovered a whole person that our family had allowed the world to forget. So instead I said, because I'm angry, Rowan, and because I'm proud of your great-great-grandmother, and I don't know how to feel both at the same time. Rowan nodded like this made perfect sense. We read for the rest of the afternoon. Elias's journal was not full of complaints. That was the thing that broke me open the widest. Elias almost never wrote about the people who had abandoned him. He wrote about Ruth. He wrote about Henry. He wrote about the way Ruth's chicken and dumplings tasted on a January night. He wrote about the exact shade of pink that the sky turned over the North Ridge in April. He wrote about teaching my father, Nathaniel, when Nathaniel was 7 years old, how to whittle a whistle out of a piece of green willow. He wrote in one entry from 1962, "People believe courage means standing on a stage and telling the truth in a loud voice. They are wrong. Sometimes courage is only this: setting one more plate at the supper table when the neighbors would prefer that you did not. Sitting one more Sunday in a pew that does not want you there. Loving one more brother when your own parents have decided he no longer exists." I read that line to Rowan out loud. Rowan thought about it for a long minute, and then he said, "So great-grandma Ruth was brave every day, not just once." "Yeah," I said, "every day, for 36 years. Rowan nodded. "I like her," he said. Late in the afternoon, there was a knock at the front door of the farmhouse. I closed the journal. I told Rowan to wait in the shed. I walked back up through the orchard. Standing on the porch was a small, round woman in her late 70s wearing a wool cardigan the color of mustard and holding a covered casserole dish. She had a face like a good apple, wrinkled, red-cheeked, sweet. "You must be Wren," she said. "I'm Beatrice Callahan. I live at the bottom of the hill. I was your grandmother's closest friend for 41 years, and I'm so sorry I did not come out yesterday. I did not want to crowd you on your first night." She held out the casserole. "Chicken and biscuits," she said. "It is the only thing I can make. Ruth used to say I would be dangerous if I ever learned a second recipe." I laughed. It surprised me. It was the first time I had laughed since we left New Hampshire. I brought her inside. I made her a cup of coffee. Rowan came up from the orchard, and Beatrice made a small, delighted sound at the sight of him and told him he had his great-grandfather Henry's ears, and Rowan very seriously informed her that he did not know he had a great-grandfather Henry. So this was interesting news. Beatrice looked at me. "How much do you know," she said, "about Elias?" I said, "I just found out today." She let out a long, slow breath. "Oh, honey," she said. "Oh, I wondered how much your father had told you. I wondered for years." "He didn't tell me anything," I said. "He never even said her name, or his." Beatrice put her coffee cup down very carefully on the table. "Your grandmother," she said, "made a choice many years ago that she would carry the secret of Elias to the grave rather than force it onto your father before he was ready. And your father made a choice when he grew up and moved south that he would carry it too. He came up here every summer of his boyhood. He loved his uncle Elias more than anyone in this world besides Ruth. He was the one who found Elias the morning he died. Nathaniel was 12 years old that summer. Elias was 60. Nathaniel walked out to the shed to bring him breakfast the way he did every morning that August, and Elias was gone. I put my hand over my mouth. "Your father wrote a small eulogy for his uncle Elias when he was 12 years old," Beatrice said, "in pencil on notebook paper, and he read it in this kitchen to Ruth and to me and to the 3 other people in this town who had loved Elias openly. And afterward he went home to New Hampshire. And he grew up, and he went to college, and he married your mother, and he had you and your brother, and he never once, as far as I know, said of the name Elias Whitcomb out loud again. Not because he was ashamed, because he was heartbroken, because in the world he was raising you into, he did not know how to explain a man like Elias without putting some of that same weight onto you. So he waited. I was going to tell you. He told Ruth the last time he came up here for a visit before the cancer came back. He said, when Wren is 18, I'm going to bring her to Vermont and I'm going to tell her everything." I could not breathe. "He was going to bring me here," I said. "He was going to bring you here. On your 18th birthday," Beatrice said. "That was the plan." I sat there in my grandmother's kitchen in a house I had never seen until the day before, and I understood for the first time that everything happening around me had been arranged long ago by 2 people who had loved me and who had run out of time. My father and Ruth. They had made a plan for me, and now without either of them, I was walking through it alone. I want you to stop with me for a moment. Somewhere in your life, there's probably a name that people in your family used to say and then stop saying. Maybe it was a brother who left in a bad way. Maybe it was a cousin who married the wrong person. Maybe it was your own aunt, or your own uncle, or your own child. Maybe it is a person you loved, and someone else told you not to love, and you obeyed, because that was easier than fighting. I would like you to say that person's name out loud right now. Just once. Say it out loud to your kitchen or your porch or your car or wherever you are listening to this story, because a name that is not spoken for long enough will eventually stop existing. And Ruth Ashcombe understood that, and she built an entire shed over 40 years to keep one name alive. If you have said that name out loud, I would love to know it. Leave it for me down in the comments below. Just the first name, just a single word, so that a stranger in another town on another night might read that name and remember for a moment that this person lived. Now stay with me, because a car is about to pull up the drive of Ruth Ashcombe's farm, and the man who steps out of it does not want the shed to stand. The car came the next morning. I was in the kitchen doing dishes. Rowan was on the back porch with a piece of buttered toast, sitting cross-legged on the boards, feeding crumbs to a bold gray squirrel who had already decided the two of us belonged to him. I heard the tires on the gravel drive before I saw the car itself. It was a black late-model SUV, expensive out of place on that road. It rolled slowly up the drive and stopped at the foot of the porch steps, and a man got out. I was in his early 50s. Silver hair, silver watch, silver-framed glasses. He wore a charcoal-colored coat that had never been rained on. He smiled at me, the way a man smiles at a waitress he is about to send her tray back to the kitchen. "You must be Wren Hartwell," he said. "My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm with Whitfield and Perry Land Development. I was very sorry to hear about your grandmother's passing. She was a remarkable woman. I wonder if you have a few minutes." He had a folder. I did not invite him inside. I stood on the porch. I did not offer him coffee. He noticed all of that, and none of it bothered him. He said he represented a group of investors interested in the North Vermont apple corridor. He said he had made your grandmother a very generous offer 3 years ago. He said your grandmother had turned it down, which was of course her right. He said that offer was still on the table. He said the number had gone up. He said he understood I was a young woman in a difficult situation, that I had a younger brother to care for, that 11 acres of orchard was a great deal of responsibility for a person of my age. He said the number. The number was $740,000. I felt Rowan come around the corner of the house and stop. I did not turn to look at him. I kept my eyes on Marcus Whitfield. "I'm not selling," I said. Marcus Whitfield's smile did not change. His eyes did. "I understand," he said gently. "It's a lot to think about. Why don't I leave you my card? Take a few days, take a week. Talk to someone you trust. Talk to your family." "I don't have any family," I said. "That's why I'm here." "Ah," he said very softly. "Well, in that case," he set the folder down on the top step of the porch. He nodded to me. He nodded more slowly to Rowan. He got into his black SUV. He drove away. I did not touch the folder for a long time. That night I could not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with a mug of tea going cold in my hands, and I tried to think clearly. $740,000 was a life. $740,000 was a two-bedroom apartment in a safe town, a used car with fewer than 50,000 miles on it, a college fund for Rowan health insurance, a savings account, a life. $740,000 was every night for the rest of my life, without the sound of Rowan's teeth chattering in a parking lot. $740,000 was every night for the rest of my life, without Elias Whitcomb's shed. I put my head down on the table. Marcus Whitfield came back 3 days later. He did not smile this time. He said he had done me the courtesy of speaking with the town zoning office. He said the shed at the edge of the orchard was not technically a permitted structure. He said the previous owner had gotten away with it for many years due to what he called the informal nature of Willowmere Hollow's enforcement. He said he was not personally interested in pursuing the matter, but he had a contact on the zoning board, and the contact was unfortunately quite motivated. He said if the shed came down, the property became worth considerably less to a private buyer. He said, however, that a large-scale developer with the right lawyers could absorb that loss. He said his offer was now $600,000. He said it would be $450,000 next week. Then he told me the last thing. He said that he had already been contacted by a party representing my late father's estate in New Hampshire. He said the party was concerned about my ability as a minor to properly manage an inheritance of this size. He said the party had inquired about the legal process for petitioning temporary guardianship over the trust during the 3 weeks between now and my 18th birthday. He said he thought I should know. He did not say her name. He did not need to. I sat down on the top step of the porch after he drove away, and I stared at the orchard for a long time, and I understood exactly what was happening. Vivian had not just wanted me out of the house. Vivian had known all along about Ruth, about the farm, about the trust. She had waited 2 years. She had let me age up to 17. She had thrown me out with 3 weeks to spare, and she had done it because she knew Eleanor Voss was going to call me any day, and she wanted me destabilized, homeless, panicked, easy to petition against. She had used my father's death as a countdown. I did not cry. I was past crying. I sat there on the porch steps of my grandmother's house until the sun went behind the ridge and the sky turned the color of an old bruise, and I understood for the first time in my life what it felt like to be hunted. Rowan came out and sat beside me. He did not ask what was wrong. He just put his small head against my shoulder. After a long time, he said, "Wren, This is where Dad wanted us to be. I feel him here, I do. I looked down at him. I know, buddy, I said. Oh, I know. Then we're not leaving, he said. It was not a question. No, I said, we're not leaving. That night, I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up the third journal, the one belonging to my great-uncle Elias, and I sat in the rocking chair in the shed by the light of the brass oil lamp, and I read late into the night looking for something, and I did not know what I was looking for. I only knew that a man who had endured what Elias had endured had learned something about how to keep standing when the world came for you, and I needed him to teach me. I read until my eyes burned, and near the end of the journal, in an entry dated 1984, I found what I had come for. When you are afraid, Elias had written, "Do not decide anything alone. Fear is a poor architect. Wait for the daylight. Wait for one honest voice, then decide." I closed the journal. I went back up to the farmhouse, and in the morning I called Eleanor Voss. Before we go on together into that phone call, I want to ask you something. If you were 17 years old and you had a 9-year-old brother and a rich stranger had just told you that your father's widow was already moving against you in the courts, and the only thing you had left in the world was 11 acres of Vermont apple orchard and a shed full of your family's 40-year secret, would you fight or would you take the money and run? There is no wrong answer. There is only the answer you would give. Whisper it to yourself. Nod your head if you would fight. Shake your head if you would run. And then meet me back inside the story. Because Wren is about to pick up the phone. Eleanor Voss picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. Marcus Whitfield, the offer, the zoning threat, the party representing my father's estate. I told it to her flat, no crying, no shaking, just the facts. The way I had learned to give facts to police officers and social workers and hospital admission staff over the last 2 years. When I was finished, Eleanor Voss was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "Wren, honey, I need you to sit down." "I am sitting down." "Good. Your grandmother anticipated this, all of it. And every single piece of what you have just described." I could hear her opening a file drawer. Ruth was many things, Eleanor said, but she was not naive. She had been through a version of this fight herself in 1990. When a distant cousin of Henry's tried to challenge her ownership of this land after Elias died, she won that fight. It took her 4 years, and it nearly bankrupted her, and she swore afterward that no granddaughter of hers was ever going to walk into that kind of ambush without armor. Eleanor took a breath. "So when she set up your trust," she said, "she included a protection clause. It's called a spendthrift provision with a supplementary guardianship contingency. In plain English, honey, it means this. If any party at all, related or unrelated files, any legal action against you or against this estate before your 18th birthday, guardianship of the trust does not go to that party. It does not go to your stepmother, and it does not go to a court-appointed stranger. It goes automatically and irrevocably to me. And I have very clear standing instructions from Ruth about what to do if that happens." I sat down on the kitchen floor. "What are the instructions?" I asked. "Very simple," Eleanor said. "I am to protect you, and I am to protect the land until midnight on your 18th birthday. And at 1 minute after midnight, when the trust activates in your name, everything I'm holding for you passes cleanly and completely to you, and no court in Vermont or anywhere else can undo it." I was crying by then, quietly, into my sleeve. "So Vivian cannot take a single acre from you, honey. Not one apple, not one board in the shed, not one letter in the cedar chest. Ruth locked this thing up like a bank vault. Your father was not the only one in this family who was planning your 18th birthday." I put my forehead against the cool linoleum of my grandmother's kitchen floor. "What about Marcus Whitfield's zoning threat?" I said. "The shed." Eleanor Voss actually laughed, a small, dry laugh. "Marcus Whitfield does not know," she said, "that your grandmother put the shed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2004. He would have known if he had bothered to search the county records past the last 20 years. It is a registered historic structure with the state of Vermont. It cannot be demolished. He can call every friend he has on that zoning board. It will not matter. The shed is untouchable." I sat on this kitchen floor for a long time after we hung up. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something quieter. I felt held. I felt held by a woman I had never met from beyond the grave, the way a grown woman holds a child in the middle of the night when a bad dream will not let go. Ruth Ashcombe had spent the last years of her life building a small paper fortress around a granddaughter she was not allowed to meet. And it was going to hold. The next 2 weeks passed in a way I could barely track. Word travels fast in a town of 3,000 people. By the end of the first week, everyone in Willowmere Hollow knew that Ruth Ashcombe's granddaughter had come up from New Hampshire with a 9-year-old boy, and that a developer from out of state was trying to run her off the land. and that the shed at the edge of the orchard was open again for the first time in 20 years. They came by ones and twos. A retired carpenter named Silas Boone came up the drive one morning with a bag of tools and rebuilt the porch railing in an afternoon and refused to take money. A woman named Alma Petrov, 70-something, arrived with a jar of honey and told me she used to trade honey with Elias for apples every fall from 1960 until he died, and she had been ashamed for 30 years that she had never invited him into her kitchen. She cried while she said it. I did not know what to say. I hugged her. Harold Prescott came up the drive on the 5th day. He was 82 years old. He drove a 1978 Ford pickup truck, the color of a robin's egg. He walked with a cane. He did not knock on the front door. He walked straight around the side of the house and down through the orchard to the shed. And by the time I caught up with him, he was already standing inside, hat in his hand, looking at the black and white photograph on the wall. I have not been in this room, Harold said, since 1990. I did not speak. Harold reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and took out a small Polaroid photograph, yellowed at the edges, the color faded to soft ochres and blues. He handed it to me without a word. The photograph showed a boy of about 11 leaning against a much older man. Both of them were sitting on the top rail of the pasture fence just outside the shed. The man was Elias Whitcomb. He was in his late 50s in the photograph, gray at the temples, tan, dark from the sun. One hand resting easy on the boy's shoulder. The boy was laughing at something outside the frame. He had a cowlick. He had a crooked smile. He was 11 years old. He was my father. I took that picture. Harold said quietly, in the summer of 1989. Your daddy Nathaniel was up here for August the way he was every summer from the time he was 7. Elias taught that boy to fish, to whittle, to hammer a nail, to prune a tree, to sit still in the woods long enough to see a deer come out on its own. Your father loved that man more than anyone on this earth outside of his own mother. And your father was the only person in this county besides Ruth and me and Beatrice who ever called Elias by his given name in public. Harold Prescott swallowed. I am not proud of a great many things in my life, Miss Hartwell, he said, but I'm proud that I was Elias Whitcomb's friend, and I'm ashamed that I was not braver about it. I would like to give you this photograph, and I would like, if you will let me, to help you fix the roof of this shed. It's got a soft spot on the north side that Elias used to grumble about. He never got around to it. Time got away from him. I could not answer him with words. I hugged Harold Prescott in the doorway of that shed until his cane clattered against the doorframe. The neighbors kept coming. I set a small notebook on the workbench beside the brass oil lamp, and I wrote on the first page in my own handwriting, if this place makes you think of someone you have loved or someone the world has forgotten, please leave their name here. By the end of the second week, the notebook had 41 names in it. Some of the names were people I had never heard of. Some were dogs. One entry was written in a child's handwriting and said my grandma's baby that got born too early in 1962 and did not have a name yet. I sat in a rocking chair one evening and found to read the whole notebook out loud, cover to cover, to no one. To Elias maybe, to Ruth, to the shed. The day of my 18th birthday came on a Saturday. Beatrice Callahan had organized a small party without asking me. She said Ruth would have wanted it. She said the town would have wanted it. She said she had already made the biscuits, so I did not really have a choice. That evening, 17 people from Willowmere Hollow squeezed into my grandmother's kitchen and living room. Harold Prescott, Alma Petrov, Silas Boone, Eleanor Voss in a plum-colored dress, Beatrice in her mustard cardigan, the pastor of the Methodist Church, a soft-eyed man named Reverend Ames, who had baptized my father in 1979, and who had not been able to look me in the eye when I had first met him, because he had been the one to refuse Elias Whitcomb a plot in the church cemetery. He had come tonight to say he was sorry. He said it to me quietly in the kitchen over a cup of cider. I told him that Elias was already buried in the orchard under the oldest apple tree at Ruth's own hand, and I thought Elias had probably preferred it that way. Reverend Ames nodded. He wept. Rowan wore a bow tie. I was very serious about it. At 9 o'clock, someone knocked on the front door. The kitchen went quiet. I walked to the door. I opened it. Vivian was standing on the porch. She did not look the way I remembered her. She had lost weight. Her hair was flat. She was not wearing my mother's pearl earrings. She held in both of her hands a battered brown cardboard box taped shut the size of a large hat box. She said, "May I come in?" I did not answer her. She said, I know I'm the last person you want to see tonight. I did not come to make trouble. I withdrew the petition 3 days ago. Your lawyer will have received the paperwork by Monday. I am not here to fight you, Wren. I am here to give you something. And then I'm going to leave. and I am not going to bother you again." She held out the box. "These are yours," she said. "These have always been yours, and I am so, so sorry." I took the box. Vivian turned to walk back down the porch steps. "Wait," I said. She stopped. She did not turn around. "Come inside," I said. "It's cold out there." She stood very still for what felt like a long time. Then she nodded and she came inside my grandmother's house, and Beatrice Callahan, without saying a word, quietly set another place at the kitchen table. The box sat unopened on the pine table for the rest of the party. After everyone left, after Rowan had fallen asleep on Beatrice's shoulder and Beatrice had carried him gently up the stairs and tucked him into the blue room, after Vivian and I were alone in the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, I opened the box. Inside were 14 envelopes. They were tied together with a piece of grocer's twine. They were addressed in my father's handwriting to me. Every one of them. The first was dated the day my father was diagnosed. The last was dated the day before he died. Vivian said in a voice that had almost nothing left in it. "He wrote you one every month, from the day the doctor told him. He asked me to give them to you when you turned 18. And I could not do it. I could not do it because it made me so angry, Wren, that he was still spending his last months writing letters to you and to your brother, and not to me. And I know how that sounds, and I know it is the worst thing about me. And I have carried it for 2 years, and I cannot carry it anymore. And I am so sorry. I am so, so sorry." She was crying. I did not touch her. I did not comfort her. But I did not tell her to leave either. I untied the twine. I picked up the first letter. My father's handwriting swam in front of me for a moment. I made myself steady. The first letter said this: "My Wren, I got the news today. It is bad news, and I don't know how long I have, but I know this. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I am going to spend whatever time I have left writing that down for you so that when I am gone, you will not have to guess. You will have paper. You will have proof." I could not read past that sentence for a long time. The last letter, the one from the day before he died, was shorter than the others. He was very sick by then. His handwriting was hard to read. "My Wren," he had written. "If something happens to me, go to Vermont. Find your grandmother Ruth. Find the little red shed at the edge of her orchard. Open it. You will understand then why I have spent your whole life trying to teach you to be kind to the people the world would rather forget. That is the only thing I have to leave you that matters. Everything else can be taken away. That cannot. I love you. Dad." I put the letter down on the pine table. I stood up. I put on my coat. I said quietly to Vivian, "Come with me." Vivian looked at me, the way a person looks at a wolf that has, for reasons of its own, decided not to bite. "Where?" she whispered. "To the shed," I said. We walked down through the orchard together, Vivian and I in the dark, on my 18th birthday, 3 weeks and 1 day after she had changed the locks of my father's house. I did not hold her hand. I did not speak to her. I walked in front. She walked behind. The wet grass soaked our shoes. When we got to the shed, I lifted the latch and I opened the door and I stepped aside. I said, "Go in." She went in. I did not go in with her. I stood in the doorway and watched her stand in the middle of my grandmother's cedar-scented room in the small circle of light from the brass oil lamp Rowan had left burning, and I watched Vivian Hartwell see the photograph of Elias for the first time. I watched her see the notebook with the 41 names. I watched her see the folded American flag and the cedar chest and the pressed apple blossoms and the worn dog tags and the third journal open on the workbench where I had left it that afternoon. Vivian did not speak. She stood very still with her arms wrapped around her own body, and she made a sound like an animal that has been hurt for a long time and did not know it was allowed to say so. I closed the shed door behind her gently, and I walked back up through the orchard alone, and I sat on the porch of my grandmother's house, and I looked up at the stars, and I did not know if I had just forgiven Vivian Hartwell. But I knew I had opened one more door. And Ruth Ashcombe, wherever she was, would have understood the difference. At the bottom of the cedar chest that night, after Vivian had gone home, and Rowan was asleep and the house was quiet, I found the last letter my grandmother had ever written. It was in a plain white envelope, unsealed, marked simply, "Last." I opened it by the light of the oil lamp in the shed. "My Wren," it began. "If you have read this far, then you have met my brother, and you have met your father as a boy, and you have met yourself as the woman I always knew you would become. There is one more thing I owe you. It is the only piece of this story I have never told anyone in my life, except Henry and Elias himself. And I want you to have it because it is the reason I was able to be brave for as long as I was. In the winter of 1957, Henry was working in the north field on our old farmall tractor. It was February. There was a foot of new snow on the ground and more coming down. He hit a hidden stump. The tractor rolled. Henry was pinned under it in the snow with a broken pelvis and 6 broken ribs, and he was 2 miles from the house. Nobody saw it happen. Nobody knew. I was in the kitchen. It was almost dark. But Elias, who had been fixing the fence on the west line, felt something wrong. He said later he could not explain it. He said his stomach turned over and he dropped his hammer and he ran. He ran across 2 miles of open pasture in a blizzard in a February dusk, and he found my Henry pinned under a 2,000-pound tractor in the snow. Elias could not lift the tractor. No one man could have. But Elias dug a channel in the snow under my husband's chest so he could breathe. He wrapped Henry in his own coat. He built a small fire on the leeward side of the tractor with a book of matches from his shirt pocket. And then he walked 2 miles back to the house, in the dark and the storm, with the snow up to his knees to get me. We got Henry out with a team of neighbors and a chain hoist at 11 o'clock that night. The doctor in town said if he had been under that tractor for another 20 minutes, we would have lost him. Elias saved your grandfather's life, and Elias never told anyone. Not the newspaper, not the pastor, not the neighbors, not even Nathaniel. Elias did not want a story about it. He said, and I will remember his words until the day I die, he said, "Ruthie, that man gave me a place at his table. This is only what a brother does." So you see, Wren, when people ask me over the years why I let Elias live in that shed, why I set an extra plate at my table, why I fought the town when the town wanted me to send him away, they thought I did it out of pity, or out of stubbornness, or out of some strange kindness they could not understand. I did not do it out of kindness. I did it out of debt. I did it out of love. I did it because a broken man with nightmares he could not name walked 2 miles through a blizzard to save my husband, and I owed him every good thing I had for the rest of his natural life. I want you to know this, my Wren, because I want you to know that when you are kind to the people the world has forgotten, you are almost never being kind. You are almost always paying back a debt you did not know you owed. I love you. I love the boy. I love the man your father was. I love the woman you are becoming, Grandma Ruth. I sat in the rocking chair by the oil lamp for a very long time after I read that letter. The wind moved gently in the maples outside the shed. Somewhere up the hill in the farmhouse, my 9-year-old brother was asleep in the blue room a stranger had made ready for him. Somewhere back in New Hampshire, a woman with worse in her than she had known was driving home alone in the dark, carrying the memory of a shed she had just stood inside. And somewhere in a place I could not point to on any map, my father and my grandmother and my great-uncle Elias were, I hope, sitting together at a long kitchen table, laughing at some old joke, waiting for the rest of us to catch up. Spring came slowly to Willowmere Hollow that year. The snow melted in patches. The apple trees put out small hard buds. Rowan started 3rd grade at the elementary school in town. He made a best friend named Toby, whose mother ran the general store. He came home the first week with a bruise on his shin from a kickball game and told me very proudly that he had defended a smaller boy from being made fun of. He said the smaller boy was new in town. He said the boy had a stutter. He said, "Wren, I told him he could sit at my table. That's what you do." I told him, yes, that is what you do. By April, I had enrolled at the community college 2 towns over. I was going to finish my high school diploma first. Then I was going to study something useful. I did not know what yet. I had time. Eleanor Voss and I filed the paperwork to have the little red shed formally open to the public 1 weekend a month. We called it the Willowmere Memory House. Beatrice Callahan was on the board. Harold Prescott was on the board. A retired history teacher from Montpelier drove up on a Saturday and offered to help us catalog Elias's journals and letters properly, so that they would last another 100 years. The notebook, where visitors wrote down the names of people the world had forgotten, was up to 311 names by June. Marcus Whitfield sold his stake in the northern Vermont apple corridor and moved back to Boston. I did not think about him often. Vivian and I wrote letters back and forth about once a month. Careful letters, small letters. We were not friends. We were not family quite. We were 2 people who had hurt each other and who were learning very slowly how to be in the world at the same time without pretending the hurt had not happened. Once in May, she drove up for a weekend. She stayed at the little inn in town. She had dinner with us on Saturday night at the pine table. She asked to see the shed again. I took her down. She did not cry this time. She stood in front of the black and white photograph of Ruth and Henry and Elias, and she said quietly, "I wish I had known your father better. I wish I had known where he came from. It might have made a difference." I said, "Maybe." I did not promise her anything else, but I did drive her back to the inn that night instead of letting her walk. And when she got out of the car, she squeezed my hand once briefly, and neither of us said a word about it. On the first anniversary of the day, I opened the shed. I went down through the orchard by myself just before sunset. The apple trees were in full bloom. The air was pink with petals. The bees were everywhere. I sat on the little bench Silas Boone had built for me and sat at the door of the shed, and I looked out at 11 acres of Vermont land that a woman I had never met had left me because she believed I would know what to do with it. Rowan came down the path after a while. I was 10 years old by then and taller, and he was carrying the 3rd journal. Wren, he said, I was reading Uncle Elias again, and I found a page I want to read to you. I made room on the bench. He sat down. He opened the journal to a page he had marked with a strip of ribbon. And in his clear, careful 9-year-old going-on 10 voice, my brother read to me. Some people believe home is a place you are born into. I did not have that kind of luck. I believe home is a place that is offered to you on a day when you are not expecting it by a person who does not have to. And if you are given that gift even once in your life, you spend the rest of your life trying to give it back. Not to the person who gave it to you. That debt cannot be paid to that person. You give it back to the next person who is standing in the rain waiting to be let in. Rowan closed the journal. He leaned his head against my shoulder. We watched the sun go down behind the north ridge of the mountains, and the sky went pink and then gold, and then the deep, slow blue of a Vermont evening in May. I thought I have a home. I thought Rowan has a home. I thought my father knew. He knew all along. That was why he taught me the things he taught me. That was why he raised me to be kind to the boy in my class with the strange clothes, and the woman at the bus stop who talked to herself, and the man who slept in the doorway of the hardware store in the winter. He was giving me the map without ever telling me it was a map. And when it was time, my grandmother had put the last piece into my hand. I have one more thing to say to you before I let you go. If this story has moved you tonight, if somewhere in it, you saw your own family, your own quiet act of courage, your own person the world was too small to hold, then I want to ask you for something. Do not wait. Do not wait for your granddaughter to grow up. Do not wait for a doctor to give you news. Do not wait for a Tuesday afternoon phone call from a lawyer in Vermont. Pick up the phone tonight. Call the person you have not called. Write down the name. Tell your children the story of the aunt who was left out of every Christmas card. Tell them the story of the uncle who came home from Korea and was never the same. Tell them the story of the friend, the neighbor, the sister-in-law, the cousin. Say the name out loud in a kitchen where somebody can hear it. Because the greatest inheritance any of us will ever leave behind is not a farm, and it is not a bank account, and it is not a beautiful house on a beautiful street. The greatest inheritance any of us will ever leave behind is the way we taught the people who came after us to open one more door. Ruth Ashcombe left me 11 acres of Vermont land, a small red shed, and 40 years of a story no one else was brave enough to tell. She left me the tools to become the kind of woman who could carry it. And now, in my own small way, I have handed it to you. If this story reminded you of somebody, leave their name in the comments below, just the first name, that is all. Let this be a place tonight where the forgotten are remembered. If you cried, if you felt the ache in your chest that some stories only get to earn once in a very great while, please tap the like button so another woman, somewhere in America staying up too late in her kitchen tonight, can find this story too. And subscribe to The Warm Floor so we can keep gathering here in the evenings and telling each other the true stories of the people the world tried to forget. I will see you next time. Take good care of yourself, and do not ever, ever stop choosing kindness.